Okay, so good afternoon, everybody. Hopefully you can see my presentation on the screen right now. Studying dentistry abroad in 2025. Thanks for joining us today. The purpose of this session is, well, it's something we found to be very useful in recent years because obviously a lot of you will be thinking about studying dentistry abroad, but perhaps not shall we say, not as your first choice at this moment in time. So you will be interested in gathering information, but not necessarily interested in pushing the button on an application until you see how things go in the UK. And that's obviously something that we fully support and understand. We are aware that you are looking at studying abroad very largely as a plan B, but that does not mean in any way that it's an inferior option. In fact, I can point to countless examples where people will tell you dental schools elsewhere in the European Union are better than ours. But really, even that's not the point. We know full well you want to go in the UK. We also know that the time to do your planning is now, not when things fall apart midway through year 13, when you've got more important things to be considering. So today I would just like to, introduce ourselves and what we can do for you on this journey. Now, to summarize who we are, I'd say that AAR Future provides students with information about English taught higher education in Europe and further afield. We are somewhat of a specialist in Europe. We do less work in Australia, North America, and places like that. We are not just solely functioned on medicine and dentistry or solely focused on those subjects, although I would say that roughly 75% of the students we help in any one year do want to study the health sciences. So it is an area where we have built up a lot of expertise in recent years. And in dentistry in particular, I would say we probably send more students to places like Spain and Cyprus than certainly anybody else in the UK right now. Why is that the case? Well, just to set the scene a little bit, in the UK, you will already know that trying to get in is incredibly difficult in the UK. This is just some data I pulled off about the applications to 5 dental schools in the UK last year, indicating the scope of the scale of the problem. You'll see that the 5 universities I've chosen there have had a certain number of applications, followed by a certain number of interviews, and then made a number of offers. Now, I calculated that this means of all the applications they get, roughly 13% of people receive an offer. And assuming that one person everywhere, or one person gets an offer everywhere, rather than some people getting 4 offers or what, that still only means that around half of the people applying for dentistry in any one year get one offer, and that's in the best case scenario. I've also put up something here to help focus people's minds as well, and that is the average UCAT score to be required to get in. Now, we often advise people to be incredibly realistic and rather brutal in their assessment of their chances in the UK. And if you are not in the ballpark when your UCAT figure comes through, it's extremely unlikely that you're going to pull something out of the hat that's going to get you a place in the UK. So, you might already at that stage see that the writing is on the wall and that UK applications are unlikely to be successful for you. And for reasons that I'm going to go into later, I would bear that very much in mind. Okay. So that's the sort of scope of the problem in the UK right now for dentistry. Now, the solutions that are available to you, what are the options for studying dentistry in Europe? Well, like I said, we only really focus on dental schools in the European Union. There are reasons for that related to recognition and quality control and so on. And at this moment in time, we are confident in saying there are 42 dental schools in Europe teaching English or teaching dentistry in English or bilingually, the vast majority fully in English. Now, the country that has got the widest or the largest number of dental schools now is Spain. We worked out the other day that if you consider in the UK, there are about 1,100 places in dentistry in any one year. In Spain, there are about 700 to 800 places in English right now. So, Spain in English is almost as big as the UK is in total. So there's a real shortage of places in the UK. Other options you'll find in Europe: Poland, there are 7, Czech Republic, 5 dental schools, Romania 4, Hungary 4, and Bulgaria has 3, and then the rest of the countries that have places tend to have 1 or 2. Now, these tend to be places like Latvia or Croatia, Cyprus, Malta. You're not going to find dental schools in France, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Scandinavia that are teaching in English. So, if you want to be blunt about it and say it's Western Europe or nothing, then it's Spain, possibly Italy. I'll talk a little bit about that in a moment, but mostly Spain is the area, the country to focus on. Having said that, I would say that all the dental schools in Europe give you a guarantee of quality. That's not the issue with some of these dental schools. We'll go into the issues in a little bit more detail. Now, also, I just wanted to put this up before we get started because money is going to come into this in a big way. I'm not going to talk too much about money during the course of this presentation, but I did just want to focus on it right now. Before I look at the individual fees, though, I will say one point about money that's hugely important, and that is there is no real financial support available for you if you're going to go and study dentistry abroad. You really do need to be thinking as if you're on your own for this. There are no dental schools in Spain, for example, offering scholarships for dentistry right now, and I doubt you'd find anything in Central and Eastern Europe either. So the fees involved and the living costs involved are largely going to be your own private concern. We can provide you with information, but we can't really provide you with the funds to make this happen. Now, here you can see a good representation of the fees that are available to you right now, or what your fees consequences would be. Italy is the cheapest there, but there's only 2 public universities in Italy, and the number of places for non-EU students, it's only about 20 in total. So it's a real long shot getting into Italy. But if you can, yes, it will be significantly cheaper. But generally speaking, when we're talking about where British students end up in for dentistry these days, there's sort of one of 2 pathways they can go down. It's largely either Bulgaria or Spain. And then alongside Bulgaria, perhaps Romania, alongside Spain, perhaps Cyprus once Spain gets full. Central and Eastern European options, they are great options. But as you can see there, the prices these days in Czech Republic, Poland, Latvia, they are up there with the prices in Spain anyway. So it tends to be that people will have Spain as their first choice, let's put it that way, and only look at those other options later on. Again, there are reasons for that, which I will expand upon during this presentation. But that is the kind of financial reality that you are looking at in terms of tuition fees. But now, what I'd like to do is sort of come back to just you and the situation you are in right now. Because if you are starting to think about this for the first time, what things are actually really, really important and what things might take on outside important but don't actually matter that much when you are thinking about dental schools abroad. Well, the very first thing I want to say, and this is something, again, which ties very much or is very closely connected with why we're doing this webinar right now, is that people often just assume that abroad will be there for them if they don't get in the UK. But you do really need to consider the fact that you are talking about living in another country for 5, maybe 6 years. And that is a real challenge. You need to be aware that you have to be mature enough to cope with this, able to get on with your studies and, live in a new country. And that is not for everybody at the age of 18. That's absolutely for certain. Some countries are obviously easier than others to settle into, but there's no substitute for, or there's no way of getting around the fact that you are the one who is doing this. So you need to be comfortable with it. It's no good your parents being on board with it if you don't fancy it. The next thing I want to say is, are you prepared to learn a new language? Now, I'm firmly of the belief that everybody can learn a language if they just put their mind to it, but it is something of a mental block for a lot of British students. Now, some countries are going to insist that you learn a language to a point of relative fluency. That would include Spain, it would include Czech Republic, places like that. Other countries are more relaxed about this, including Cyprus and Poland and Hungary in our experience. But, I don't see this as a massive barrier, but it is something you need to think about. Now, the next 2 points I put up here are not really related to you so much as they are to the dental schools that you're applying to or might be interested in applying to. Now, often people will be thinking about the quality of the dental school and the ranking of a dental school. I would argue that rankings aren't really going to help you tremendously. I think that the next question is the real one you need to get an answer to when assessing quality, because you're not really choosing a university because it's the best in the world or anything like that. Your eyes are going to be focused firmly on the prize, namely becoming a dentist. So for most students that we help, it's very clear that what they want is to get in, out, and back practicing in the UK. So that's why this question takes on outsized importance. How many students are admitted into the first year and how many graduate on time? You really do need to pay attention to this. This is another reason why we're so keen, and you're going to hear me talk a lot about countries like Spain, because you can say that, the vast majority of students who start in any one year will be dentists 5 years later. You start looking at dental schools in Hungary, Czech Republic, Poland, you can no longer say that with any degree of certainty. And that's not because, as some people will say on online forums, oh, they failed me for no good reason, or they just wanted to make more money out of me. It's just because their systems are very, very different. And British students do sometimes struggle to adjust to that. But it's certainly not something that's done from, well, in my experience, vindictively, let's put it that way. But it is a reality that in a lot of countries, it's quite normal to repeat a year because you failed an exam somewhere. It's not an unusual circumstance. The next question that I put up here is something that over the years has become more and more important to us. And I think going into a regime where recognition of degrees could be a lot more fluid, let's put it that way. I'm going to talk a lot more about recognition later. You really do need to focus on this. How do the clinics work? Will you have to find your own patients? Now, this might seem a little bit strange to you, but in countries like Bulgaria, for example, you have to largely find your own patients to get your clinical hours in. And so it's not unheard of for students there to have family members fly out so that they can, practice on them. I've spent a lot of time in Prague recently in the Czech Republic, and my Facebook feed is littered with master's students at the universities there begging for patients who want to come and get free treatment in English. Some countries will have an endless stream of patients coming out the door, so you've got nothing to worry about. For example, a couple of months ago, I was at the Medical University of Wrocław in Poland, and their clinic was full of patients. You're not going to struggle to see people there. The Spanish clinics, the Cypriot clinics, again, no problem. But some places you really do have to worry about that. And if you are not getting enough clinical hours, that could really have an impact on your future registration prospects. Currently, nothing to worry about, but it is something that you do need to bear in mind. Now, another thing you're going to need to think about, and this is perhaps a little bit easier to discuss in the British context, because I am sure all of you are doing subjects that are sensible for applying to British dental schools. So when you're looking at the subjects required to get in abroad, they are, broadly speaking, similar. For nearly every university that we've come across, you are going to require biology A-level. For nearly everyone, but some exceptions, chemistry is also going to be required. There are some dental schools out there who will allow you to not have chemistry so long as you do have maths or physics. But if you don't have biology and one of maths, chemistry, or physics, it's really, really going to be tough. You could apply, for example, in Italy without any of the sciences. They're not required there, but their entrance exams will test you on your biology, chemistry, and you almost certainly won't do well enough if you don't have the required, if you don't have the required levels or the required A levels. So A levels are the first thing that you need to bear in mind. I often tell people that if you've got A, B, B, or better, we can definitely help you. Below that, things start to get a little bit trickier, but it can still be done. However, having said that, for some countries, it's not really the A levels that matter so much as it is performance on an entrance exam. For example, if you look at a country like Bulgaria, their official entry requirements for A levels will specify that you just need C's in biology and chemistry, which is relatively modest. If you have better grades than that, it will improve your chances of getting in. But the thing that makes the biggest difference is the entrance exam itself. Now, these entrance exams are often quite different from what you might expect with the UCAT. To the best of my knowledge right now, there are no universities in Europe that will accept a UCAT score or even look at it, okay? There were a few that used the BMAT or the IMAT until relatively recently, but those no longer exist. And I anticipate that some will allow the UCAT in the future, but for the moment, we're in a sort of period of adjustment, and I don't know of any that require the UCAT score, certainly none of the ones we work with directly. Now, the entrance exam will be different for pretty much every dental school. So even when you're looking at a country like the Czech Republic, where they have 5 exams or 5 dental schools, you'd be talking about 5 different exams there. Italy has 1 exam for the whole country, but like I said before, there are 2 dental schools there with maybe 20 places for non-EU students. So it's pretty tough to get a place there. So one of the biggest issues with entrance exams is that if you do start applying to universities which require these, you are going to have to do loads of preparation. You're going to have a different curriculum for each and every one, and your life is going to become quite complicated. This is largely part of the reason why we don't work with universities that require entrance exams by and large, 1 or 2 exceptions there. And it's largely the reason why students are no longer going to places like Hungary, Poland, Czech Republic, Latvia, when they can get in elsewhere without. Although I should say there is 1 Polish dental school that doesn't require entrance exams these days. The other problem we have with entrance exams is that they happen at various points throughout year 13. In year 13, you need to be focusing on your A-levels. It is terrible advice to drop your A-level study to start concentrating on performing well in an entrance exam. Never, ever do that for any exam anywhere at all. Your A-levels are super important. Entrance exams, they come around a few times a year and you'll have a few goes at them. So don't worry about them quite so much. Typically, entrance exams will start happening around March, April. Some dental schools will have them after results day. So, you could get to the summer, see what A-levels you get, and still have time to take entrance exams in the Czech Republic, for example. Medical University of Sofia actually has an entrance exam as late as October after the A-levels. So, it could be that you're doing these outside of your A-level period, but where they coincide, I always have to say, just if you're struggling with your A-levels because of entrance exams, drop the entrance exams. So what is on the entrance exam? Well, pretty much every single time you'll have a multiple choice biology and chemistry section. There will also usually be verbal and mathematical reasoning, logic, and so on. Some will have maths and or physics included in their entrance exam as well. Everyone is different. Usually finding this information from the universities themselves is quite easy. I'm very skeptical about preparation courses for these kind of entrance exams. But I'd have to say in recent years, I have seen that British students do struggle with some of them. So it might be worthwhile investing in some kind of preparation course if this is the route you want to go down. Now, another thing to bear in mind is that occasionally you will have to travel to the university to take the entrance exam. They're usually a lots do have them in the UK and Ireland, for example, where you can take them at a test centre in London or something like that. Pre-COVID, a lot more did have entrance exams on their campuses. Then they went online, but they are starting to go back to doing their entrance exams on campuses as well. I think the main reason behind that is because it shows a genuine commitment from students to travel to a place to study there. And it's just a useful way of killing 2 birds with 1 stone. You actually get to visit the university that you might end up studying at. And I think that's a very, very sensible thing to do in the best of cases. But obviously, from a time point of view and a money point of view, that might not always be the best news. So when it comes to looking at your options in a bit more depth, though, so once you've worked out where you might want to apply, whether or not it has an entrance exam, what the entry requirements are, how much it costs, etc., how are you going to find out more information? Well, I would always advise you to try and get in touch with current students at a university, but it is important to remember that their experience will not be yours. So, sometimes positives get overstated and negatives definitely get overstated when you're reading people's online reviews and stuff like that. So be a little bit careful about student feedback, let's put it that way. You might also look at online forums. I have to say these are of limited use and questionable accuracy. I mean, about once a week, I will look on things like Reddit and the student room, and I will find that 50% of the things there are just downright wrong. 20% is probably right, and 30% is wrong, but probably not going to hurt your chances. Okay, so there's an awful lot of rubbish on these forums, and if I had more time and if I was more generous, I would go on there and correct these things. But yeah, that's that. You'll just have to take my word for that. Now, another source of information that I put up here are agents. And there's a lot talked about agents in this space as well. And I suppose I should say that on some level, we are an agent. We didn't start out that way, but for some universities, that's what we've become, not because we wanted to, because that's the way that certain universities wanted to interact with us. So you might be thinking here that agents have just inserted themselves in here to try and make money from whatever angle, but generally speaking, it's largely because that's what the universities themselves want. That's how they want to work with representatives. Now, you will find a variety of different ways in which agents work in terms of how they charge fees. I would say that, we don't charge fees by and large. If you're applying to a university abroad through us, I can promise you that it will be no more expensive than applying directly. And I can also promise you that, well, actually, in one case, it'll be cheaper than applying directly, but you can work that out as and when we talk about particular options. Some agents will charge you a lot of money up front. That's usually because they don't actually have a relationship with the university they're working with, so you don't actually have to go through them at all. But I will say that, agents are valuable. We have loads and loads of experience. You are going through this for probably, I hope, only the first time in your life. I go through it 1,000 times a year with people. So, it's far more likely that we do have an inside knowledge as to what is happening in any one year with the applications process. We've got a lot more of experience of what just sounds right and what frankly sounds like nonsensical. So, you're always better off speaking to somebody who does know that. But again, there are enough people out there. And if you are feeling you're getting some kind of hard sell or people are pushing you in a direction you really don't want to go into, just put the phone down and move on. There are plenty of other people out there. So agents have their place. Agents are largely having to behave the way they do because universities are restricting them. It's not some kind of game where they're trying to make as much money as they possibly can out of you, or those people who do behave that way don't last tremendously long in this sector. So you can use an agent to apply, or occasionally you can apply directly, but the way that you apply will be the same in both cases. So what I'd like to talk about now is how to come up with a sensible application strategy. Okay, I would encourage you to have more than one choice abroad. You might think, and some people do think, they have this kind of ridiculous perspective that, oh, if I'm paying all this money, I ought to be able to get in easily. Not true, really not true at all. You need to get out of that mindset if indeed you were ever in it, okay? So do come up with a few places, come up with a short list, much as you would do in the UK. And that will be informed obviously by tuition fees, student satisfaction, entry requirements, and so on. In terms of doing your research, again, this is the reason why I wanted you to show up here today. Do your research into your international options at exactly the same time as your British ones, meaning over this summer holiday. When you come back to school in September, hopefully you will know which British universities and which foreign ones you might be interested in. Now, when it comes to applying abroad, don't start until you are ready. By which I mean, don't start an application abroad if you're waiting to see what happens in the UK. So this is what I was talking about before with things like your predicted grades and your UCAT scores. If there is anything there to suggest that your application is borderline, it is almost certainly going to be unsuccessful. That's just the truth of the matter. Even if it looks great on paper, you might still not get in. There are plenty of people out there predicted 3A stars and with UCATs of 2,800 who don't get offers and do end up talking to us. But what I would say is if you are waiting to see what happens in the UK, make that your main focus. Just keep us on the back burner, okay? Because the problem is if you are applying abroad at the same time in the UK, foreign dental schools, if they make you an offer, will usually want you to reserve it in a matter of days, sometimes 48 hours, sometimes 10 days, sometimes a month. And if you don't pay within that period of time, you will be, removed from the application process. And in many cases, that's it. You won't get a second chance in that year. You'd be welcome to try in future years. They won't hold it against you forever, but they won't allow you to apply again in that particular window. So while you are doing your research, I would suggest that if there are application deadlines, if there are test dates, you make a note of that in your diary, But again, don't move on these things until you know that you absolutely have to. But obviously, that creates a bit of a conflict because some dental schools are going to get full before you know what's going on in the UK. This has actually been a massive issue for us this year, far more so in previous years. 5 years ago, we could get people in on results day, no problem. But then some of our universities have been filled for months already in 2024. So when are the deadlines that you need to be aware of? Well, Spanish dental schools usually operate what's called rolling admissions, meaning there is no deadline, or there's like a deadline every month and they consider everybody who's applied that month on the same day. And so that means they're not waiting to get 1,000 candidates and they choose the best 50, which is essentially what happens in the UK. It's like if you apply and you are good enough, sure, why not? Let's process your application. We're not sitting around waiting for somebody else to come in a couple of weeks' time. So there's no deadline in that sense. However, when they are full, and there's nothing you can do about it. Now, UCV, Universidad Católica de Valencia, which is without doubt the most attractive option that we work with these days, that's been full this year since December last year. So for the last 6 months already, we haven't been able to get anybody in for September 2024. And the waiting list there, well, we stopped adding people to it because it's already too long. Now, obviously, if the same thing happens again this year and they are full in December, that's likely to be before you've had interviews in January, February, which could make things a little bit tricky. And that option might be off the table by the time you need it. Dental schools in Central Europe, places that I mentioned in Czech Republic and Hungary these days, some of them don't even get full these days. So there might be places available well after results day. Some will though, okay? And places like Bulgaria, supply is much smaller than demand these days. So they will get full, but it will be later when they get full. Now, as I've already mentioned to you before a couple of times, public dental school, that should be schools, there are 2 of them now in Italy. The exam will only happen a few weeks before you actually end up going to university. So the exam for 2024, for example, will happen in September 2024, and then you'll get a place to start in October 2024 if you are incredibly lucky. Again, there are very, very few places there. You need to have a strategy as a backup plan to your backup plan if you are going to go with Italian options. Otherwise, you almost certainly are looking at a gap year abroad, a gap year before you get in anywhere. So as you've probably already worked out, this doesn't fit with UCAS and UK applications. So basically, I've probably covered a little bit of this ground already, but I will just summarize it now. The 15th October UK application deadline, yeah, that's relevant in a UK context. It means nothing globally. If you get rejections straight away and nobody wants to interview you, which is obviously not what you're looking for, and I hope that doesn't happen to you, then we can help you pretty much immediately. If you get rejections in December, January, we can almost certainly find you a place for the following September. If you get rejections after interview, well, unfortunately, British dental schools are getting later and later in terms of when they are confirming places for people these days. If you hear in March, some options will have gone. If you're hearing in May, June, then more options will have gone. And at this stage, looking forward to 2024 applications, we can probably help about another 4 or 5 people this year, and then that's it, we're done. Okay. If you get offers, however, and you're going all the way through to results day, and then for whatever reason you don't make the grades required, there will be options for you for sure in places like Bulgaria, Czech Republic, possibly Cyprus. We have helped people get into dental school in Cyprus on results day in the last few years. I'm a little bit skeptical that that will happen this year, simply because, and this is another problem that's crept up because of Brexit, if you are British, you need a visa, which means as a last minute candidate, you are a lot less attractive than somebody who doesn't need a visa. So, you might have brilliant grades and you might be slightly disadvantaged if you're applying that late. But, if you do get to results day and that's the first time it's looking like you're going to need to go abroad, you're welcome to call us. We'll do what we can for you within the realms of what is possible. Now, the next thing I want to move on to is, hopefully I've given you a sense there of the application process, so that's all clear what issues you're going to encounter. But I imagine one of the questions you're really going to have is relating to recognition of qualifications post-Brexit. Now, this is a bit difficult for me to talk about because We don't know is the honest truth as to what's going to happen with recognition by the time you leave dental school. In Ireland, it's very simple because there's no problem whatsoever. Post-Brexit, we just reverted to the qualification recognition framework that was in place pre-EU membership in the 1970s. And that is basically, if you qualify in Ireland, you can work in the UK and vice versa. But then getting in Ireland is incredibly tough. If you think the UK is difficult, Ireland is almost certainly not going to be the answer. There will be a third dental school in Ireland from next year, but even so, that's not going to really help you tremendously. Now, recognition of European Union qualifications, obviously including places like Bulgaria and Spain, is still automatic. We've had a couple of occasions post-Brexit when we could have changed the recognition regime, but we haven't. We just rolled over the decision. So that decision currently is rolled over until 2028. At that moment in time, something is going to change, or not, as the case may be. But we don't know what that is, and we probably won't know for a couple more years. So we can't tell you whether you're going to need the overseas registration exam. This is one of those areas, when I was talking about nonsense on student forums, there's a lot of it here. Please only refer to the General Dental Council website on this. Anything else you read, take it with a pinch of salt, because there's an awful lot of historical information out there. There's an awful lot of very, very confused people who think they know stuff that they don't. Now, a word about the overseas registration exam. It is going to change, but we don't know how, and we don't know whether it will be relevant for British nationals come 2028. But do expect changes with the ORE. So, the current regime will be a little bit different. If you qualify today outside the European Union, say you were in Georgia or something like that, your degree wouldn't be automatically recognized. You would have to do the current overseas registration exam. But that's, unlikely to, well, that's, I wish I knew more about this. I wish I could tell you more with certainty, but I really can't. This is actually something that comes from the GDC's own website, which refers to what happened about a year ago, which was what I just told you, that the GDC welcomes news that European dental qualifications will continue to be recognized for the next 5 years. So that's great if you're going to graduate before 2028, but honestly, you're not going to, so it's not tremendous help for you. So what about other things that you could be considering apart from, going directly to a dental school abroad? Because obviously there are a few things you can do in the UK that supposedly keep the pathway open to becoming a dentist. And I'd just like to give you my opinion on these things, okay? Please bear in mind this is my opinion. Others might have different things to say for them. Please bear in mind as well that I spend an awful lot of time speaking to people who've got problems. I don't spend an awful lot of time with people who have gotten in without any difficulty whatsoever. So there are people for whom these routes work out, but I would say there are also an awful lot for whom they don't. You might be offered a foundation year at a UK university, like a year of study, and then if you do well enough, you'll move into dentistry proper. I know these things exist in places like Leeds, Bradford, Plymouth. Yeah, we help people every year who've studied these programs to get in abroad where it hasn't worked out. So do be mindful that you might just be delaying a no by 12 months. A lot of people are also tempted by biomedical science into graduate entry. That's going to mean it's going to take you 7 years to qualify. Not terrible. You can actually fund this entire route through student loans, which you can't if you do BSc biomedical and then do undergraduate dentistry. Then you'd have to pay the tuition fees for that. So it might be the only affordable way towards becoming a dentist. Having said that, it is still super competitive to get into graduate entry. And if you find yourself after 3 years of biomed science or equivalent degree, and you don't get a place in graduate entry dentistry, and you don't even get a place in undergraduate entry, you will still be looking at going to study abroad for 5 years. And credit recognition from these degrees, don't do it. I know you're going to want it, and I know you're going to be tempted to go with any agent offers it to you, but don't do it. This is where recognition nightmares happen, because if somebody inspects your degree, takes a greater deal of interest in it later on, and they see that your 5 years at university weren't all dentistry credits, but were biomed or something else credits, then it might be that your degree is completely derecognized. This is the big problem that people have had in places like Georgia in the past. And it's not so much of a problem in the European Union because, quite simply, biomed science credits will not be recognized for dentistry degrees. The only way you can transfer credits now within the European Union is from dentistry to dentistry. That is legitimate, but unfortunately, it's going to mean you probably lose a year or have to go back into the beginning of a degree, and you will inevitably lose money if you do that as well. So don't, whatever you do, plan on a transfer. Another different kind of transfer that we often get students talking about is when they can't get into their first choice abroad and they think, well, I'll go to another one and then I'll move after a year to my desired university. No, you won't. Okay, just don't do it. Okay, there's no point even going down that route. We've had several people who try it and it just doesn't work. Starting abroad and transferring back to the UK, this never happens. It does happen for like German and French and Italian students that they can start abroad and maybe be able to get back into their home country after a year or two. It's not going to work in the UK. So when you go abroad and you hear that your German classmates are all trying to get back home as soon as they've arrived in another country, yeah, they might be able to, but you won't. Okay, so just keep those things in mind when looking abroad. Now, what I'd like to move on to now is just for a couple of minutes to run through some of the options where we can help you directly. I didn't mean this to be, an advert as such for our services. I wanted to provide you with as much general information as possible, but I'm sure some of you are interested in what options we can help with. UCV, Universidad Católica de Valencia, has been the most popular in recent years. This is largely because student satisfaction is brilliant there. The care that we're able to offer British students there is the best anywhere else in Europe, because there is an organization on the ground that does look after students there. GDC Education is their name. Their degree, 5 years, fully in English. You, as with all Spanish dental schools, need to get to B2 level on the Common European Framework of Reference by the end of year 3, or else you won't be going into clinics. But you're never going to sit an exam in the Spanish language. You're never going to be sat in a lecture in the Spanish language. UCV has probably about 65% of its students from the UK. Outside of Bulgaria, this is by far and away the most British dental school abroad. I would actually prefer to keep that percentage down, but I know you might have a different way of viewing it. Entry requirements there are entirely transparent, ABB, including biology and chemistry. Okay, predicted grades we will work with if you're taking your A-levels for the first time. If you're resetting your A-levels, we will not look at predictions, but we would consider you if you've got ABB in your resets, although that would probably delay by another year your being able to study there. Now, one thing that's unique about the UCV application process is you do have to go to Valencia for the interview. The reason for this is not because we can learn anything new about you by having you show up there in person, but you can learn an awful lot by attending and seeing the university and the city you go to. Over all the years that we've been doing this, the biggest obstacle, the biggest problem that students face when going to a dental school abroad is unlikely to be academic, at least not immediately. Some just never adjust to negative marking or regular exams, every 8 weeks and stuff like that, which continual assessment is far more common abroad. Some universities even have oral exams where you'll be expected to give, verbal answers rather than written ones. That can all be tough to adjust to. But the first thing you encounter is living in a strange city. And in the past, we've had students go there and in the first week just go, nope, sorry, not for me. And the best way to avoid that is to get you to go over there and look in your eyes while you are sat in that country and ask you, are you sure you want to do this? So that's the reason the interview is in person in Valencia. There is also an online test that you have to do. This is a formality for all Spanish dental schools. Doesn't really matter too much how well you do in that. We are not looking for you to be perfect. We are looking for you to get a score commensurate with what we would expect somebody with ABB in their A-levels to achieve. Admissions for 2025 will open in October 2024. There is no point talking to us before that because we'll be too busy settling in the current students. But from that moment on, I would expect that the university is going to be full by December again, 6 weeks. That's pretty much the window. For students who don't get ABB, we did launch last year a foundation program for students with around between 3Bs and 3Cs, or if they're missing one of the science A-levels. That is a 6-month program starting next time in January 25, which gives a direct place into dentistry in the first year. I will only work with foundation programs that guarantee you access, subject to you doing well enough, okay? I'm not interested in the way these UK ones work, where they take in 107 get to progress. Just no. The next most popular university we work with is Universidad Europea, rather. They have 3 campuses in Spain, one in Madrid, where they teach fully in English, and 2 in Valencia and Alicante, where the degree is bilingual, 3 years in English, 2 years in Spanish. Again, you need Spanish at B2 by the end of year 3. Obviously, if you're going to study in Spanish, you probably want to be a bit better than that, but you need that for the clinics anyway. Now, these are bigger universities. So Madrid in particular has about 260 students these days. So when I say 15% of the students are from the UK, that's still around 40, which is probably about the same number of Brits as there are at UCV, actually. Entry requirements, really, really tough for me to give you a clear answer on this. There is a very weird convoluted system that they use in Spain or at UEM. Your A-level grades have to be converted into the Spanish Bachelorado. If you're doing 4 A-levels, you are at a massive advantage. So actually getting 4 Bs is better than getting 3 A stars, to be fair. Although if you're only doing 3 A-levels, we'd probably say AAB is the minimum required. They have monthly admission windows throughout the year. Your chances are better the earlier you apply. The longer you leave it, the chances are you're going to need higher and higher grades to get in. They also have an online Spanish test, which from this year accounts for 10% of the assessment. The reason why I've said 80 to 90% on a Spanish Bachelorado is it's 90% if you are a native English speaker. If you're not, then it's 80% on the Bachelorado, 10% on English, 10% on Spanish. But they just assume that natives can speak English well enough. Admissions for 2025 rather, will open in November 2025, with the first application round happening in December and the first offers being made just before Christmas. UCAM in, well, it's a University of Murcia, but you can only study on their Cartagena campus now, is another one that teaches fully in English, again requiring Spanish, about 20% of their students from the UK. A-levels, ABB, again, quite simple, quite transparent. There is an online interview, but it's much more of an assessment of your maturity and motivation than it is, an MMI or, clinical scenarios that you would expect in the UK. You could actually already apply for 2025 there. They've opened admissions already simply because they're getting requests for it, but only if you've already got your A-level grades. If you're waiting for if you've already got predictions right now and you're waiting until August for results day, then yeah, you would have to wait until you've got your actual A-levels in hand before you can apply. European University Cyprus. Again, I really like this university. The students we've sent now are really, really happy with their studies there. Minimal Greek language requirement, meaning you don't have to learn to anything like the level you would do Spanish. A growing number of British students there. 10% of their students in dentistry are from the UK or UK and Ireland, I would say. But there's also a lot of British students there studying medicine across University of Nicosia and EUC. ABB, this is the one university we work with where you don't absolutely need chemistry, but you will need another science. You won't be interviewed unless there's some reason why they want to interview you. And like I said, we can still get you in for this year. For 2025, admissions will be open from November 2024. Other universities that we do work with that I don't really want to go into in more detail right now, 2 in Croatia, University of Zagreb, University of Rijeka, and 1 in Poland, Wrocław Medical University. The reason why we've chosen to work with them is because it is, in my experience, Wrocław is a fabulous student city, great place to live. You'll be very happy if you were there. Some of the other Polish cities I'm less convinced by. And also, again, their admission process is quite transparent, no entrance exam, assessment based purely on A-levels and a personal statement. So those are the options where we can help you. You can get more information about, well, presumably you've already been on our websites, AAR Future and the studyincroatia.eu. You're also welcome to email and contact us through Twitter anytime you want. But obviously the purpose of today is to allow you to ask whatever questions you might have. So hopefully I've managed to answer a lot of them so far, but I'm